everyone for joining us for Coach Franklin's weekly press conference. We'll start with an opening statement from Coach, and then we'll open it up to questions. Coach?
Yeah, so like always, appreciate you guys coming out, cover Penn State football. Appreciate it, really do. Obviously, we got homecoming this weekend, which is always a cool deal. I think it's 103rd. 103rd homecoming game. Our fans have been awesome all year long. We're averaging 110,000. Let's do that again this week. Let's pack this place. Have it rocking. Use your tickets. If you're not going to use your tickets, find somebody to use your tickets. And let's have this place rocking again. I did want to give one of our guys some love because I don't think he's getting enough attention for how well he is playing. It really started in training camp and has continued, and that is Johnny Dixon. I think Johnny is playing really good football. I think we have two corners, and we have more than that, but two corners, and specifically Johnny and Kalen, that are tough guys and that are physical at that position, which is less common now than it used to be. And they do a really good job in a lot of different ways, not just defending the pass. Johnny's a great blitzer, and then also supporting the run. So I wanted to give him some love because it's deserved. From a UMass perspective, Don Brown, the head coach, I go way back with Don. Don was the defensive coordinator at Maryland when I was the offensive coordinator. So we got history, obviously been at Michigan and a ton of other places as well, well-respected head coach as well as defensive coordinator. When you talk about kind of getting into some of the specifics, their offensive coordinator we've been impressed with, Steve Kasula, I think is how you say his name. Steve's doing a really nice job for him. We've been impressed with them on offense. They're an 11 personnel, no huddle, spread, heavy RPO team. Maybe the most explosive team we've played this year. If you look at them statistically, they're number 2 in major college football of plays of 50 yards or more. They're ranked number 2 in the country. Plays of 10 yards or more, they're ranked 9th in the country. So this is an explosive team. We feel like they're skill players. I think they got 43 transfers, if I'm correct there. We think their skill players on offense would start for a lot of people. Wide receiver Anthony Simpson is an Arizona transfer. We've been impressed with him, 17 yards per reception. Running back number 15, Lynch Adams, is a Rutgers transfer. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry. And then their quarterback, who we recruited heavily out of high school, Tyson Pumachan, was at Clemson, was at Georgia Tech, and is now at UMass. Is completing almost 66% of his passes and doing some really nice things. So, these guys have got our attention, and specifically on the offensive side of the ball, I think are doing a great job. Defensive coordinator Keith Dzinski, who I've known for a long time as well. Keith's been tied with Coach Brown for a long time. I think Coach Brown, I don't mean this with any disrespect to anybody, but I think Coach Brown is calling the defense. I could be wrong there, but either way, those two guys have been really connected for a long time. I got a ton of respect for Keith and Don, both as defensive minds. Guys that we've been impressed with is D-tackle number 42, Billy Wooden, who's a big kid from Towson, Maryland, 6'3", 310. Defensive tackle number 56, Cletus Mathurin, who's from Hartford, Connecticut. He's another D-tackle, is over 300 pounds. They got a defensive end named Marcus Bradley, who we recruited pretty heavily out of high school from Gaithersburg. Went to Vanderbilt originally and then transferred to UMass. He's a 6'3", 260-pound disruptive player. And then their safety, number 21, to Ray Powell is from New Jersey. They're the guys that we have a respect for. And then special teams, Ben Albert, who I've also known for a very, very long time. Ben is their special teams coordinator, is also defensive line guy, strong defensive line background. Was at Boston College for a long time, Duke for a long time, been in the NFL. We've been impressed with their number one, their punt returner, Isaac Ross. He's another transfer, but also doing some really good things in the return game. No real changes from a depth chart perspective that we need to discuss, and I'll open up the questions.
All right, let's go to Rich Scarcella with the Reading Eagle, and then Mike Gross, you're on deck.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good, Rich. How are you, man?
I'm well, thanks. James, what did you want to get accomplished during the bye week? And I was wondering, how have the way you've handled bye weeks changed over the years, or has it changed?
Well, I think a couple things. Bye week, probably number one is self-scout, kind of looking at yourself, what you're doing well, what you need to do better, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. But then we also did it across the ball. We had the defense evaluate the offense evaluate the defense, and then all of us really on special teams. So that was valuable. And then obviously practice enough that we can stay sharp and get enough full speed, good on good periods, which are really valuable, but also not too much that we have a chance to recover and get fresh and get healthy for the second half of the year. So kind of a combination of those things. I thought we were able to do that. We practiced on Sunday. We practiced on Tuesday and Wednesday, more traditional type practices for us. And then Thursday was a coordinator and GA practice, which was more of a jog through. And then obviously a ton of recruiting. I think I started in Connecticut, then went to North Carolina, then went to Florida, then went to New Jersey, then went to Massachusetts, if I'm remembering that correctly. Got a ton of work there done. Got a ton of work, in recruiting done. So that was valuable, and so did the rest of the staff. And then obviously back in for, I wouldn't necessarily call it a traditional Sunday practice, because we didn't have the previous film to review, so we were able to, kind of get ahead. And then obviously, with our staff changes over the last couple of years, we have personnel that are able to do other projects for us as well, which is also valuable. So, there's strength in those numbers, and not just numbers, but guys that have tremendous experience and tremendous resumes that are able to get some projects done for us. So I think we got a lot done. Really, the differences probably from my time at Vanderbilt and then my time when I first got to Penn State is just how the staffs have changed. We have more staff, as well as we have the staff that we do have, I would say is more experienced across the board. We've always had some experienced guys. We've been fortunate, guys like Jim Haslett and things like that. So we've had some good experience, but I just think we have more guys with experience that really can give us some good information and get some work done on their own. So it was valuable. And then the players were able to get some time off, and a lot of them were able to get home and see family and go to high school football games and enjoy themselves. So productive, but now we got to get back to work.
Let's go to Mike Gross and then Donnie Collins. You're on deck.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good, Mike. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. You kind of anticipated with your comments on Johnny part of my question, but could you talk a little bit about how having two corners, and I know you have more than two, but let's just say have corners that you can trust to sort of handle their business, how that sort of has a snowball effect in terms of what Manny can do defensively and just the overall defense?
Yeah, I think if you look at college football and really the NFL, I think it starts at corner and defensive line. Those two positions are critical to how you want to play defense and really what you're able to do defensively. A lot of those things are predicated on those two positions. So having two corners where I think they are unusual is they check a lot of boxes. You know, a lot of times you'll have guys that are really good in coverage, but maybe they don't want to tackle, or maybe they're really good in coverage, but they're not great blitzers. You know, these guys do a lot of things, and then not only that, they're big guys. They're guys that can mix it up in there and defeat stalk blocks, whether it's Kalen, how quickly he triggers on perimeter players, or whether it's Johnny being able to defeat guys with his hands and techniques and fundamentals. And then their ability to make plays on the ball and be able to run with people. So, those guys have been, I think, a big part of our defensive success. Obviously, Terry Smith's done a great job. We've talked about him. And then I think the combination of them covering to allow us to get home in some of our sacks, because the quarterback's got to hold on to the ball by taking away, maybe his first option. That helps our defensive line, and then vice versa. The better we rush the passer, the less time that we have to be in man-to-man coverage when we decide to play man-to-man. So I think it really starts with those two positions, but specifically the two corners that you mentioned.
Let's go to Donnie Collins and then Johnny McGonigal. You're on deck.
How are we doing, James?
How are you doing?
Good. You've always spoken well of your relationship with Don Brown, and I'm wondering how he kind of affected you as a coach, as an offensive coordinator back then. I mean, you were a younger coach at that point. Did you do a lot of the stuff you talk about today with the scouting the defense and scouting the offense back and forth? And what did he kind of teach you about that kind of element of coaching?
Yeah, it's funny because I think it's both, right? I think for all of us, whether it's coaching or any other profession, you learn from a lot of the good experiences you've had, and you also learn from things that you would do differently. And Don did a really good job of getting the defense to understand his system, to buy into his system, and play extremely hard. The other thing that I learned on the other end of the spectrum, and I mean this in terms of as a head coach, is Don has always run an unorthodox system. And as a head coach, I got a very structured way of the way we install and the way we teach. And a lot of that comes from Don, to be honest with you. When you're trying to install a defense or when you're trying to install an offense, I don't allow the offense when we're doing install during spring ball or training camp that Manny's got to teach his defense, and then also he could get empty, he could get unbalanced, he could get motions and shifts. We don't do that. So it's like, on this day, you're going to get this from the offense, and on this day, you're going to get this from the defense. And that was always a challenge with Don, because Don, that is his base. It's like, okay, we're trying to run it against a base defense. Well, he doesn't really have a traditional base. So, in terms of, how he did such a marvelous job of getting his guys to buy into his system and play extremely hard and have a lot of confidence within the system. He does a phenomenal job, as good as I've been around with that. But then also, in terms of how we structure practice and how we build, making sure that the offense and defense, is doing it in a way that allows both sides to kind of build a foundation and go from there. So, got a ton of respect for him. This Saturday there'll be some challenging looks that we'll get. But to be honest with you, that's a big part of how we do things here, is based on some of the challenges that he presented as a defensive coordinator when I was a young offensive coordinator.
Let's go to Johnny McGonigal and then Ben Jones. You're on deck.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. So, James, last month you were asked about scheduling teams like Delaware, and you said there was a pretty good data to suggest that scheduling like that in the non-conference helps teams win championships and get to the playoff. I'm curious, though, do you see that approach to non-con scheduling changing or staying the same, with a 12-team playoff arriving soon? It seems like there are points to be made on both sides of that.
Yeah, I would say there's a team in this conference specifically that's buying out of a ton of game contracts that are already signed to go in the complete opposite direction. So no, I don't think it's changed. I would say you could even make the argument it's magnified, and that's why people are changing their schedules because you look at who people are going to have to play just in our conference. It's going to be even more challenging than it's ever been. So I don't think the philosophy or the model has changed. You got to do whatever you possibly can to give yourself a chance. Number one, to be undefeated at the end of the season. To your point, with a bigger playoff, there's probably a little bit more wiggle room in terms of right now it's kind of undefeated or at the most one loss. And then on top of that, if you're not scheduling to be undefeated, you're scheduling to have as least as many losses as possible to give yourself a chance to be in the playoffs. There's another team in this conference that has had a ton of success the last couple of years, and again, I think it would follow the same argument. So no, I don't think so. And from the ADs and head coaches and people I've talked to, if anything, I think it magnifies it even more.
Let's go to Mark Wogenrich and then Frank Bodani. You're on deck.
Hello?
Mark?
Sorry. Got me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, Greg. Sorry. The teams, just following up on that, the teams you just discussed in the Big Ten, is that a reaction to expansion and 12-team playoff? And is that the model that you want to pursue? Or is that just something that they're doing on their own?
I'm not sure what you're asking. Be specific.
You said there's a team in the conference buying out game contracts. I assume that means non-conference game contracts in the future.
Yes, sir.
Is that a model that you would follow, or are you not working that way? And is that a response to expansion in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think that's a response to expansion in the Big Ten. In terms of the model that we're using here at Penn State and we're discussing, I don't think the model has changed. I think I've been pretty clear on where we should schedule and how we should schedule philosophically. And again, I think the data backs that up. I think this actually got brought up because somebody else was asking about our schedule. I'll leave it at that. But no, I'm just stating I can't necessarily speak for what they're doing and why they're doing it and how they're doing it because I don't sit in those meetings. But if I had to guess, I would say, yeah, it's probably, I don't know if I describe it as a reaction, but a strategy.
Let's go to Frank Bodani and then Corey Geiger. You're on deck.
Hey, good afternoon, James.
Good. How are you?
Real good, thanks. Drew Aller has not turned the ball over yet in not just this season, but his career at Penn State. Can you speak specifically to his decision-making, his ability to protect the football? Is he further along in some of those areas than you could have imagined with his experience?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it a whole lot, to be honest with you. But yeah, he's doing a really good job from a decision-making perspective. I think from an accuracy perspective, with an understanding of the offense. One of the things I thought was most exciting, in the last game was Mike's ability to call shots down the field, and if the underneath coverage sinks, taking checkdowns. That's extremely valuable as a play caller when you have a quarterback that will allow you to call shots, not force the ball down the field, and take the back as a check down, and still, I think, in some of those create explosive plays. So I think all those things kind of factor into it. I think the biggest thing is kind of like what we've talked about before, is his poise. A lot of times, turnovers go hand in hand with guys that are panicking in the pocket or in decision making that force you into a bad decision. One of the things I think we're doing a better job, not only in games, but also in practice, is throwing the ball away. Like, you can't sit here and say we're going to throw the ball away in games and never do it in practice. You gotta throw the ball away in practice, and sometimes that's the best decision that you can make. I think he's also shown the ability that when he does get pressure, that he knows where the outlets are, where the running backs are, where the tight ends are. And so as soon as he makes a sudden movement to avoid pressure, he's trying to get it to the back. And I think that's really valuable as well. So all things that we take a lot of pride in and that we're building on, but I also think that goes with the offensive line and protecting him in his blind side. That's the running backs in protection. That's the fundamentals of two hands on the ball in the pocket. It's all those things.
Last question from Zoom, Corey Geiger.
Hey, good afternoon, James.
Hey, Corey.
A follow-up to what you were just asked there about Drew. Is there a balance, though, between, hey, we need you to throw the ball deep no matter – just take a shot. Don't overthink it. Take a shot. We need to see it. We're going to call it. And we need you to get some confidence in doing this, as opposed to even giving a young quarterback the chance to say, hey, just check it down if it's not there.
I don't really understand what you're saying, because we would never, like my skin is curling when you say just drop back and chuck it deep no matter what. Like that is like, I don't even know what you're saying. It's like you're speaking like from
just
Mars.
Send a guy on a post pattern, take the shot, throw it.
No matter what.
Give your receiver a chance to make a play on a ball. Even if he might be covered 30 yards down the field, maybe you think he'll be open 45 yards down the field, and like Godwin did, or with Jahan or KJ. I still don't, like, you're speaking Japanese. Like we have never done that. Just throw the ball up and maybe he'll be open and maybe he'll catch it. Like, my skin is like you're making me uncomfortable. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. So okay. Yeah, we would not do that. We would never do that. We've never thought about doing that as a head coach, as an offensive coordinator, as a receivers coach. I coached the receivers. I didn't want them to do that. So no. Strong no. Like, yeah, no. I'm hoping we can cut this out so this doesn't even get out into the universe.
All right, please raise your hand and we'll bring a mic to you. We'll start with Mark over here.
James, following up on Rich's question earlier, where are you guys big picture-wise from a health perspective coming out of the bye? And if I could ask you specifically about one guy, JB, anything you can tell us about him? Thank you.
Yeah, nothing has changed with JB in terms of kind of how we normally discuss injuries and things like that. Nothing has changed there. In terms of health, I think we're in a pretty good place from the things that we talked about in terms of the number of reps our guys have had in games, the number of guys we're playing. I think we're in a pretty good place from that perspective. I mean, obviously, you'd always love to be totally healthy, and we're not that. But I think we're in a pretty good place. I thought the guys did a really good job. The staff did a really good job of managing, the bye week reps as well, because that's something that
probably I didn't talk about when I got asked that question in the beginning is that's also one of the things you're trying to do in practice. You're managing the reps of the guys that have earned that. You know, a guy who's played a ton of football at Penn State, who's played a ton of football in terms of college football in general, has played a bunch of reps for us this season. All those things kind of factor in, and then you kind of manage that as well. So nothing is changed from an injury standpoint to address with you guys. But I think we're in a pretty good place. The reality is we need to be in a good place going into this game, and we need to be in a good place coming out of this game as well.
Over here on the left, Jared.
Hey, Coach Franklin.
Hey, Jared.
You mentioned that there's a lot of D linemen that you're impressed with. Add that with the multi-layered defense you're facing. When you take all those things into consideration, does getting your run game going early take higher precedence than usual or not?
Yeah, I wouldn't say either. I mean, as you guys know, we want to have the ability to run or pass in any game and in any given situation. That's kind of how we view balance. And we want to continue to build on that. This game could look very different depending on how they decide to defend us. We could throw it 50 times or we could rush it 50 times. And that's who we want to be offensively. We want to have the ability to do what we need to do to win and manage the game. And then on top of that, I think when you talk about, the opportunities for big plays coming in the run game and the pass game, I still believe those are coming. But at the end of the day, we need to do what we need to do to win games and be able to take what the defense is giving.
Bob?
James, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. You mentioned Johnny Dixon at the start of the news conference. Another guy that you got via the transfer portal, your Ivy Leaguer, Hunter Nortad, just his impact the last 2 years being able to play multiple positions and to come from an FCS school to really thrive at this level. What do you think that says about him? And he kind of a rare player in that respect to be able to make that jump and make it in a big way.
Yeah, and I think he's done a really good job. I mean, culturally, he's been a great culture fit for us. Really well respected in the locker room from the players, from the staff. I think him coming back this year was important for him and us. That was a decision that he needed to make. And I think it was the right decision. And really, I think that's part of my responsibility, right? When a guy decides to come back, we got to make sure that it was the right decision for all parties involved. And I think the way he's playing right now, his ability to play center and guard is extremely valuable. And his approach, his maturity, he's getting an MBA right now from Penn State. When he's not in class, he's in the weight room, stretching, working on mobility, does a great job with his nutrition and hydration. He's just one of those guys that I think is a really good example of the importance of maturity on your football team. And has done a phenomenal job. We've been fortunate. The guys that we've been able to get out of the Ivy League have done a really nice job for us. Great academic fits for us as well. Obviously, they're guys that come here and thrive and usually end up getting some higher ed degrees in terms of master's degrees and things like that. So he's been awesome. He really has. And I think when you have kind of a center that can be the quarterback of your offense and a left tackle like we have in Olu, that's a pretty good recipe for success at those two positions to start to build the rest of the pieces around. And then obviously the experience that we have at right that's an important piece, that center position, and Hunter's done a really good job of really studying what we need to do up front and how we need to do it. So he's been awesome.
Audrey?
Hey, James.
Roger.
Going back to when you hired Manny Diaz to now, what have you learned about Manny, the coordinator, but also Manny, the person? Because so many of your players have raved about him and what it means to kind of learn his defense and the way he explains it to them.
Yeah, I think, when you talk about intelligence, right, you're talking about people that can take complex ideas and really be able to explain things in a way that whether it's the players or whoever else can receive that information in a way that makes sense. And I think Manny's done a really good job of that with our defense and specifically with our defensive players. I think it also helped that he's taking over a unit that had played good defense before. And I think a lot of those things of how they were taught, Manny's bringing it in from maybe a slightly different perspective. And a lot of specifically the veterans in that room, I think, have really appreciated looking at the game from a different lens. But I think the other thing that happens sometimes is when you're young, you think there's one way to do things and be right and be successful. And the older that you get, and we all do, you realize there's a lot of ways to be successful and a lot of ways to be right. I think it also is magnified that room had a ton of respect for Brent Pry. So when he left, that was hard. I mean, that really, I think, struck a lot of guys, on our team, and then specifically on the defensive side of the ball with a lot of question marks. And then when you're able to go out and hire a guy like Manny and he comes in and right away is able to get up in front of the room and talk about how we're going to play defense and how we're going to build on that foundation. He was able to get buy-in right away. And then in some ways and in some areas has even taken it to another level. So I think the veteran players, I think it's kind of like an aha moment for them, and a real appreciation for it. So there's been a lot of growth there. And I think we're playing, obviously, with a lot of confidence, and that stems back to Manny and the whole defensive staff. It also stems back to some of the conversations that we just had earlier about our corners and what our corners allow us to do defensively. So, in some ways, I think about some of the turnover we've had on the staff, not just at the coordinator positions, with some guys that have been with me for a long time and were established guys around here. That's why hiring and recruiting are two of the most important things you can do, is get the right people in here to build on the foundation and to build on those relationships. And then in terms of just, as a person, Manny and his wife and his sons, it's been awesome. And the thing that probably has surprised me the most is how quickly he's been able to adjust here and hit the ground running. And like I said, when you have, an experience like he went through, and I call him literally, like I felt bad calling him like the next day, but how quickly he and his family were able to transition here, and really not miss a beat. That's been really impressive. And then I think the last thing I would say is the value of his previous experience of being a head coach. You just look at the game differently after being a head coach. And I think that's been really valuable. I think when you're an assistant, you have a lot of opinions on what you think you would do as a head coach. But having guys that have actually done it, there's a ton of value in that. But he's also come back and just been one of the guys, and I think that defensive staff has got really good chemistry, and the players kind of see that and feel that as well.
In the back, Andrew.
Hey, Coach, back here.
Andrew.
last year, I don't remember if it was after Ohio State or Michigan, you had talked about the defensive line playing small. You had challenged those guys, said something about them wanting to be playing, I forget who, Aaron Donald, I think is who you compared them to. When you self-scout now over the last 2 weeks, week or so, do you feel better about where the interior defensive line is now as to opposed a year ago, specifically size-wise?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I think we are bigger across the board. Defensive end, we're bigger. Defensive tackle, we're bigger. We're bigger across the board. And part of that is just kind of the natural maturation process that happens for these guys. That's part of it. But I also think they've done a good job of emphasizing it and putting the right weight on, because we're not a weight for weight's sake type of program. Like, we want our guys to be lean and athletic, but more importantly, they're playing, in a way that they're so disruptive. We're more consistently gap sound. We're more consistently disruptive. I know Manny and Dion have been very pleased. As we sit in there, I watch the game typically on the ride home on the plane, and then I watch it, typically in the morning, and then I watch it with the defense. And just hearing them, talk about the defense and how we're playing, guys doing their job on a consistent basis. So we are bigger on the defensive line, which I think has been helpful, because it is one of your tools, right? Strength is a tool, speed is a tool, intelligence is a tool, quickness is a tool, these are all tools, and you want to make sure that you have as many of these tools on your tool belt as possible. But they're also playing bigger in terms of being disruptive and being gap sound and doing their jobs on a consistent basis. And the thing that we spend a lot of time talking about, a lot of times, okay, you didn't make the play, but you caused the play. You created the play. You created an opportunity for somebody else for a tackle for loss by doing your job. You created an opportunity for a sack for somebody else by doing your job. So we spent a lot of time talking about that as well, and I think that's been one of the things that's been really cool, is to see the guys embracing their roles and understanding if they just do their jobs on a consistent basis, the plays will naturally just find them. They'll come to them, rather than feeling like you have to make a play. That's typically when problems happen.
On the right, Tyler.
Hey, James, how you doing?
Hey, Tyler.
Going to Zariah Fisher, he's obviously been a consistent member of this defense all season. Can you peel back the curtain a little bit for us in terms of what his path has looked like to this point? We didn't see much of him on the field at all last year. He was a linebacker when he first got to campus. Just curious from your perspective how he's gotten to where he is impacting games now.
Aliquippa's finest.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm a big Zariah Fisher, fan. As you mentioned, we recruit him. He's a linebacker and tight end. Shows up here. We always kind of thought he had a chance to grow into a defensive end. Already had the size, super long arms. Made that change, kind of with his blessing and support, and really started to do some great things. Then gets an injury, a fairly significant injury, misses some time for that. And it just kind of continues to chip away at it and continues to get better and better and better, both physically and mentally in terms of understanding how to play D-line. It was new to him, understanding the scheme. And he's one of those guys, to me, that's a really good example for a lot of guys in the locker room. He's one of those guys that's just getting like 1% better, 1% better, 1% better. And it maybe doesn't jump out at you dramatically, but he just continues to get better. And now he's making plays for us and doing his job. I think he's got a really bright future here at Penn State. And then after that, to me, is what everybody's looking for, at defensive end. He's got the ability to be disruptive. He's got the size. He's got the length. He's got the athleticism. He's had a smile on his face really since he's got here. He's had some personal adversity and challenges and setbacks, probably more so than most, and just continues to find ways to be successful. So I'm really proud of him. I'm really proud of him, and I think you'll see him continue to have a good year this year, and I think that's going to springboard him into really good things in his future.
Time for two more in the back. T. Frank.
Hey, James. How you doing today?
Hey, T. Frank. Good, man. You?
Good. I want to ask you about balance again. You talked about what you think balance is earlier in this conversation. How many teams, just to put it in context of what you're pursuing, how many teams have you coached that have true balance, or how many have you seen that have that level of balance that maybe you're pursuing this year?
Yeah, I think in terms of being able to run and pass, we have as good a balance as I think we've had, and maybe that I've been around. Are there some areas of balance that we're probably still searching for? Yes. But I think our ability to run or pass the ball is problematic. I do believe that. You look at it in short yardage. It shows up in short yardage. Right now, we're able to throw in short yardage situations. We're able to run in short yardage situations. That makes you difficult to defend. People have to respect our running in short yardage situation. Our ability to dictate a game in terms of how we run the ball against some really good defenses, and not get away from it and stay with it, I think has been really good. And then our ability to throw for a high percentage and protect the football has also been good. So I think we're in a good place. I think there's still room for growth there. In terms of the total package and where we can go offensively. But again, to your point, just the balance that we're able to exhibit on first and second down and even third down makes you challenging to defend. And I also think it complements defensively when you talk about time of possession, them creating turnovers and 3 and outs, and then our offense controlling the ball and controlling the clock. Sometimes you're left with very little opportunities if you're on the opposing sideline, and that's frustrating, especially when you have a lead.
Last question, John.
Hey James, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Where would you say that the receivers and Drew's trust is at between each other at this point? And do you think that's important in taking the next step as an offense? Was that something that that you emphasized during the bye week?
Yeah, I think it's a process, and I think we have made progress this past week and have made progress this season. I do think that's back to kind of a health perspective. I think that's where that's been probably impacted as much as anything is. When you really had 2 guys that have played a ton of football for you at the receiver position, and there being some consistency and trust in practice and in games with those guys, and then you lose one of them, for a couple weeks, that magnifies that. So being able to have Trey back and Keandre on the field while those other guys are developing, those roles and those opportunities and that confidence, I think will be helpful. But I think getting Trey back is a huge piece of that puzzle. I think it helps Keandre. I think it helps Drew. I think it helps our team. I think it helps our offense. I think it helps Coach Yursich in calling the game. But I think that will really help us. Having those 2 guys, both on the field at the same time.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Thanks, guys.